Welcome in Corbett's Corner. We've got our guy Ricky Larson, Lucky Shots Media, back with us to get all the fantasy football advice. Want to do a little bit more structured type of show here as we'll kind of just run through each game and just kind of talk about, we've obviously got the guys you're must start in. We could just run through those, obviously, but some of the tougher decisions and some of the murkier kind of pictures. And we just talked about it, Ricky, one of the craziest NFL trade deadline we've seen. Blockbuster names going, changing zip codes, and obviously a lot of fantasy football implications for places they've left, places they're going.
Oh yeah, sitting here with the two biggest offensive trades yesterday, sitting with T.J. Hawkinson, Chase
Mhm.
Claypool. Hawkinson, I think it's a better spot for him than in Detroit. I know that in Detroit he had a lot of success this year, not so much though. Uh, Going into an offense that likes to throw the ball, we could say,
Yep.
and uh, I think, you had kind of mentioned on my show something about Adam Thielen. I think his ship's already sailed. Uh, so I don't think he's going to affect much of this offense. I think any targets he may have been getting will now go to Hawkinson. Uh, does it bring down Justin Jefferson? I don't think so, but there is a possibility that we see Jefferson drop down from monster games to not pedestrian, but like still high end,
Yeah.
lower games. Uh, so I really like that. Claypool with the Bears. It's
Eh,
not because even like we look at the Bears and Justin Fields has been finally kind of scoring
yep.
fantasy wise, but it's all been on the ground. He's had maybe 150 passing yards. It's just I don't necessarily think it's going to be anything fantastic for Claypool. It could be. Maybe the Bears start throwing for 250 a game at least, and Claypool is a part of that. But what I am more looking at with the Claypool trade is how does this affect Pittsburgh now? Like,
Yeah.
who's going to be the guy? I know Claypool wasn't the guy, but still somebody they were creative with trying to get the ball to. So now who kind of takes over that role? Where do the 5 targets a game that he was getting go? I really think George Pickens' stock grows here.
Mhm.
Just the guy's an animal, and hopefully it helps him. You got before the trade deadline, the 49ers went out and got Christian McCaffrey. Uh, that paid off last week.
Yeah.
He was involved everywhere, had 40.26 fantasy points. And normally when you see like 2 decimal points, you're like, how the hell did he do that? Well, he threw a 34-yard touchdown along with catching a touchdown, running for a touchdown. So uh, with the 49ers, I think he's a hell of a lot more dangerous than he's ever been, as long as he can stay healthy, because he's in
Yep.
the land of where running backs go to the IR, and
Fragile.
he's not a guy that is he's not a durable guy. So
Yeah, no, I like it. I like the story too. I'm not a Shanahan guy, but he literally, I think, was asked his coaches. He goes, "Hey, can McCaffrey throw?" And someone like texted him a video of him throwing from 2016. And of course, all right, Shanahan pulls it out and it works perfectly in the regular season. Let's pump the brakes. The only thing on the TJ Hawkinson is the Vikings have seemed to not figure out what the tight end position could do for them. So I'm
yeah,
eager to see what can happen. And kind of too is like, okay, it's the first week. Like, do you roll the dice and start Hawkinson this week? You said it, McCaffrey less than expected in his first week with the 49ers. That's because, it's McCaffrey and they just sent him out there to run flat routes and it worked out fine. But then we saw the full capability of what he could do. What about Hawkinson this week versus the next?
uh, you know, anytime you have a trade like this, you typically want to wait a week. The guy's got to come in. He's got to get acclimated. He has to figure out what the playbook is. They have
Mm-hmm.
to work him into that game plan. Probably a slow week this week.
Yeah.
I'm projecting he's probably still going to do all right and be, tight end relevant for fantasy, which just means about 10 points.
Bingo.
As long as your tight end's getting 10 points, you can be happy with it. So I think it'll be a lower end game, but I think after the first week, getting acclimated, going throughout the rest of the season, he's going to start getting progressively better and better and be a guy that you're not worried about going
Yeah.
in, week out.
Excited to see. Vikings 6-1. Minneapolis is going crazy. So is this team as we get into the games here. Eagles, Texans, it's Thursday night football. You're starting Hurts. You're starting Dameon Pierce. You're starting A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith, I was a little disappointed with this game last week. And is that something I should be worried about, or is this a total bounce back spot?
I'm hoping it is because he has to be in my lineup this week. There's no way around it for me. The only other option would be Brandon Cooks in that same matchup.
Hmm.
I still think Devontae Smith is fine. Uh, he's he's a guy you have to just curb your expectations with.
Yeah.
You need to expect anywhere from 10 to 12 points. And when he goes over that, you're going to be happy.
Yep.
Because like we saw last week, with AJ Brown, it could just be AJ Brown, 3 touchdowns for him. So, Devontae Smith, he's a very talented young athlete, very good. But as long as you curb your expectations and you just expect 10 to 12 and somewhere in a flex spot, you're going to be happy with what he gives you because he'll probably get over that.
Would you rather start Miles Sanders or Devonta Smith?
Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders is somebody I actually like in this matchup.
Yeah.
Looking at my show that I did yesterday, Miles Sanders is actually in my start list because Houston, they're 32nd against the fantasy running back position. They give up,
Dream matchup.
yeah, they give up a bunch of points. In just the last 2 weeks, they've given up 72.3 fantasy points to the running back position. That's just 2 weeks. There's some teams who haven't even given that the whole season. So in just 2 weeks, it's been 2 really tough matchups for the Texans, but Miles Sanders is a guy too that you didn't expect much out of him this year. And he's kind of overperformed what you even expected. So I think this is a great matchup for him. He's definitely one of my starts for this week.
Are we totally out on Brandon Cooks? It was a kind of a prove it game this last week. He's underperformed again. It's been kind of a career down year, and now this is obviously a tough matchup.
I was really hoping he'd somebody that would move yesterday.
Yeah.
I was really hoping because there's teams that need wide receivers. The Packers, for example. God, I would have loved for him to go to the Packers.
Yeah.
But, you just kind of need to expect what he's done all year because I don't see that really changing. From maybe gets up to 15 because they're going to have to be throwing. But it's a tough Philly defense. He hasn't performed huge all year. So I'd say anywhere from 10 to 12 for him.
Yeah.
Maybe the ceiling of 15, but that's really pushing it.
And there's almost more bust potential than boom with him at this
Yeah.
point. All right, Colts, Patriots, Nyheim Hines gone. Jonathan Taylor is disappointed, but you're obviously going to throw him into your lineup. Ramondre's a start. Michael Pittman Jr. is a start. But we talked about this. The Colts receiving core, we kind of wanted to wait and see. And did we learn anything? Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, I assume both these guys are on the bench this week.
Yeah, those two, you can't trust that. With Sam Ellinger, I don't even know if you can trust Michael Pittman. I mean, I was talking about it with a colleague yesterday. The NFL right now, you've got a few teams where you're like, okay, we know what they're about, but we have so many teams in the NFL this year where you're still sitting here halfway through the year and you're like, I don't know what the hell to think of these teams or any of the players on them. And the Colts are one of those teams that, especially now that they've switched quarterbacks, I don't know what to expect. Every week because I have Jonathan Taylor, I expect to be disappointed. Luckily, last week I made the decision to put in Tony Pollard instead of Jonathan Taylor, and that paid off for me.
Boom.
But do you understand how hard it is to put your number 1 pick when you were number 1 in the draft and you went Jonathan Taylor? You know how hard it is to put him on the bench?
Yeah.
But it worked out, and that's kind of where we're sitting with Jonathan Taylor. On the other side, you got New England, who you expected to be halfway decent. They've been halfway decent, but they've had games where they just totally lay an egg, and it's hard to figure out what to expect from them. Ramondre Stevenson for a couple weeks, booming, and you were just like, yes, this guy can start him all year, no problem. I haven't really heard much of him in the past few weeks. So it's two teams where you don't know what to just sit there and expect from either side.
Stevenson's been quieter, but I will say it's been a lot in garbage time. And that's what I love about the Patriots is like I foresee this as they are just going to hand the ball to Ramondre. Now, Harris is a little bit riskier. I don't know if you could bank on starting him. He's kind of more of a single digit guy.
Yeah, he's sitting on my bench, and I decided to go get a couple guys off waivers like Tyler
Yeah.
Algier instead
Oh,
of
yeah.
trying to play Harris this week.
Jacoby Myers had another one of those games, but the only guy I feel like I could trust on the Patriots week in, week out, surprisingly, for the last 5 years is Ramondre Stevenson. And he'll probably lay a goose egg for me this week. Myers against the Colts, that might be a tough call.
We are in, and this is something else we got to keep in mind. We are in the thick of bye weeks as well.
6 teams on bye this week.
Yeah, if you're sitting with Amari Cooper, if you're sitting with CeeDee Lamb, if you're sitting with George Pickens or Deontay Johnson, if you're sitting with Debo or Brandon Ayuk, these are guys you're going to have to replace this week. So, Myers, I don't hate it if you have to play him because there is that potential there. And most teams, what other options do you have if Myers is sitting on your bench and you have one of these guys?
Right.
It's kind of where I'm sitting with Brandon Cooks. I'm not expecting a lot, but there's potential for it to be something.
We touched on the Vikings quite a bit. You're starting Jay Jettas. You're starting Cook. Let's see. You've got Terry McLaurin, I think, with Heineke in there's a start. You got to throw him in there, obviously. Tread lightly with Thielen, tread lightly with Hawkinson. But if you got to do it, you got to do it, especially at that tight end position. Talk about the Commanders' backfield as Gibson has almost resurged and grabbed the horns, right? Because what do you do with Brian Robinson?
Brian Robinson was a guy that I was able to draft super late and just stick on my bench after he got shot. Coming back, looked like what they said in the preseason was what was going to happen. He started to trend up, and then, actually, Antonio Gibson's still a thing. Right. It sucks, man. I was so excited about Brian Robinson, and it's just turned into you can't trust either one of the people in the backfield because years past, it's been Antonio Gibson and JD McKissic. McKissic has bigger games than Gibson most of the time, but he also has games where he doesn't do anything. So honestly, who's going to be the guy that scores the touchdown this week? That'll be hindsight's 2020, but that'll be the guy who you would have wanted to start this week.
Right. Chargers, Falcons, true or false, the only Falcon you are thinking about starting is Tyler Algier.
Yeah.
It's either him or Pitts, right?
You could possibly think about rolling Pitts just because it's the typical fantasy tight end room of if you don't have the top few guys, you're just hoping for 10 points. And Pitts is a guy that possibly could give you 10 this week. Just based on last week, he finally got a touchdown. He's
right.
Every once in a while, they remember that they have him and he gets some fantasy points. Not sure why they don't go to him more.
They barely throw it seems. I mean, they have Mariota, but
yeah, and Mariota, he's been a decent fantasy look as well. If you're
because he can run
quarterbacks, I mean, he's been a guy who I do heroes, villains, and good Samaritans on my fantasy show, and he's a guy that I've talked about quite a few times in the good Samaritans category of you didn't expect much, and he overperformed what you thought, somewhere in the 20-point range. So he's not a bad stream option either. But yeah, I think I'm hoping it's going to be a huge game for Algier because the Chargers can't stop anything on the ground. They are currently second to last against fantasy running backs. So big week for him is what I'm hoping.
Any worry about Herbert with all the weapons dropping like flies? We don't know what we're going to do if Keenan Allen will ever return and be the guy that he is. Obviously, you're starting Ekeler. I think it's going to be an absolutely monstrous game for him. And I could see a point where the Chargers are chasing points. But I'm a great matchup on paper. I'm just a little worried about Herbert with the lack of weapons and his O-line just being an absolute mess.
Yeah, this is just where you've got to count on Herbert being Herbert. It's we even look at any time at any point this year, he's been able to still get it done throwing to everybody.
Yeah.
And you've got guys like Gerald Everett, who I think it'll be a decent week for him this week. You got Joshua Palmer, who sometimes gets involved. Eckler, I think, is going to lead the team in receiving this week. Uh, if you do get Keenan Allen, that'll help. But I think you just got to trust that Herbert is that guy and he'll find a way to get it done. But set your expectations low. If your expectations are low, you can't get that disappointed. So if he gets you over 20, you're going to be okay with that this week.
I'm 3-5 in my deepest league, and I need it. I need it. Had him
Yeah.
off the bye last week. My lineup's just I'm piecing it together. It's just a rag doll. I am piecing my lineup together week by week.
That's how I've felt so far this year. But we're currently sitting at 2-6, 3-5, and we're starting to make a comeback. So you just got to stick with it.
Yep, of course. And the waiver wire priority always keeps you in it. Dolphins, Bears. I mean, you're starting Waddle, you're starting Hill, and you're loving every absolute second of it. Tua absolutely banged this past week. Justin Fields trending in the right direction. Shallower leagues, you're going to pick him up this week. He's going to be the top waiver ad. It probably already was as it's cleared. If he's available, go get him. Should be a great matchup. We talked about Claypool. What are we going to get? Fields has been doing a lot of his stuff on the ground. So the injury report for Raheem Mostert made me throw him in the bench, and then he was cleared, and I started him, and I would have been better off with what I had originally. And I'm thinking about it again this week. But Chase Edmonds gets traded, but then the Dolphins just traded for Jeff Wilson Jr., right? Give me your thoughts on this game, and is it a conversation of would you start Herbert over Mostert? Probably not, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, because we're talking about Khalil Herbert, yes.
Yeah.
We talked about him a little earlier today. He's a guy that obviously is the better back in that backfield, just doesn't get the love from the coaching staff, the play calling. Mostert is a guy that broke my heart 2 years in a row, so I just hate him now.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, I think in my brain I see the Dolphins being up at some point, but I also expected that. What was it, 2 weeks ago when they scored 2 touchdowns right out of the gate, and then it was a close game. So I think it just depends on the game plan. If this stays close, I think you can count on Mostert. But if it does get to be more of a wider margin, I think you go Herbert here.
Yeah, no kidding, because Mostert's not exactly a threat in the run game. Or excuse me, in the pass game, rather. Panthers, Bengals should be pretty easy. I mean, obviously, just because of volume, we're going to be starting, obviously, Higgins and Boyd. Mixon's going to get you his usual numbers, although you might get it the hard way. Burrow, Panthers. Here's what's interesting. DJ Moore is having a resurgence, which is nice. I think you can confidently start him, even though it was the Hail Mary that kind of got him those numbers. Deontay Foreman absolutely pops as Hubbard was out. Wonder what's going to happen with Hubbard here. Any worry if he's back that maybe Foreman doesn't get as much?
It is the NFL and coaching staffs are very dumb. But I think if you look at the last 2 weeks, Foreman has been a stud.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you go away from that?
Yep.
That being said, Carolina will probably go away from that because that's just how coaching staffs are in the NFL. But if you've got a guy like Foreman, it's kind of a tougher matchup. Cincinnati's pretty decent against running backs, but he's a guy that you got to plug into your lineup. You can't ignore the fact that for 2 weeks he has been good and just solid good, not anything crazy and fantastic. Yeah, he's had three touchdowns. What was it, last week or the week before? He's very involved in the run game, and I'm going to say it, he's a very good running back.
Yeah.
And I think it's a favorable matchup. I think you gotta start him. I would even venture to say he might have a better game than Mixon.
Yeah, no, I think that could be very possible. He should. He could score in bunches. Packers Lions might be a mess. This it should be a good fantasy game, but where do you go? The total's at 49.5, so they're expecting a shootout. We talked about the Lions, as a defense, haven't gotten anyone less than 24 points, so there's points to be had, but the Packers have certainly pushed that envelope as not being a great offense. What's your read on this game?
Um, hot take. It's the Green Bay Packers, so it's not going to be a shootout. It's
Yes.
going to be a low scoring game. And honestly, I'm okay with not starting a single soul from this game.
Yeah,
That's
how about that?
literally where I'm sitting. You possibly could start Aaron Jones. He's a decent start. You possibly could start Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I don't see a lot of offense really popping off in this game. You got Green Bay, who can't move the ball. You've got Detroit, who uh, sometimes they move the ball, but it's Green Bay. Their defense is pretty all right. If you're going to start anybody, it's got to be St. Brown and
Yeah.
Aaron Jones, but I'd be okay not starting anybody.
Yeah, seriously. And for deeper, like Reynolds hasn't paid off. I think he's probably relegated to the bench. You never know what his status is week in, week out. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, what's going on with Swift and the backfield in Detroit? Just more health or a little bit more of a, hey, he's not exactly the guy inside the 10 anymore.
I've got to. I just said I wouldn't start anybody, but I have to start DeAndre Swift this week. So I'm hoping because, he was out for 2 weeks before the bye.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously they had the bye. Then he was out the week after. Last week was kind of his first week back. Going to be slow in your first week back most of the time, coming back from injury. So hopefully this is a week where, like I said, I hope it's close and he gets a lot of touches, either in the run game, maybe some catches. So I'm hopeful, but I'm not in my rational brain. I'm not expecting a whole.
Bills Jets, huge spread here, even though it is at MetLife Stadium. Josh Allen, no brainer. Diggs, moving through. I mean, the Jets are interesting because you got Carter. You're specifically buying low or liking James Robinson as that backfield continues to get murkier.
Yeah, I mean, like I talk about James Robinson all the time. I am a James Robinson guy. And, if we look at this backfield, Brees Hall finally popped off, and the Jets, what were they successful doing? Running the football. This is a game where I I don't necessarily like them for this game because I think they're going to be down by a lot, but it is an interesting game, and I think James Robinson, maybe not this week, but going forward, could definitely help the Jets get back to the game plan they like and be that guy.
Yeah.
Um, it this you like to talk about trap games. This possibly could be one of those because let's be honest, the Jets they've impressed over what we've expected. So could be more than meets the eye here, and maybe they catch the Bills sleeping at least for the first half and get some fantasy points there.
I kind of like the line, as you said. And there was that game like last year where the Bills were, double digit favorites and just randomly lost in Jacksonville.
Yeah,
So let's go to Jacksonville. We've got the Jaguars returning from London. Travis Etienne season. He's absolutely eating. What do people do with Devontae Adams? They chalk that up to the illness. Raiders are an absolute mess right now. I don't think you can rely on Chris Kirk anymore unless you're in a deeper league and have to start him. Yeah, I think that's about it. What's your read here in down in Saxonville?
I don't think you need to worry about Devonte Adams. If you look at the resume from this season, it hasn't been the games that you got from him in Green Bay, but he's still doing all right. Last week was the one outlier of bad games because I was looking for my sit candidates and I was like, oh, maybe Devonte Adams because he had a bad week. And then I look at the rest of the weeks, I'm like, shit, he's just fine.
Yeah.
There's no reason to be that worried about him. I think he still gets his in this game. Uh, Josh Jacobs, I'm hoping he gets back onto that 30-point run that he had for
Yeah.
3 weeks because that definitely helped out this starting to come back stuff.
Yeah.
So really hoping he's got a decent game in him. I don't need 30 points, but somewhere in the 20s would be nice. And then, ETN, we just saw him last week run for 156 yards. First time he's had the backfield by himself. Kind of like that. The Raiders, they're not all that great of a defense, so
Yeah.
could be a smash play there. I think you can still start Trevor Lawrence too here. Talking about streaming quarterbacks,
Sure.
it's he hasn't been fantastic, but this is a favorable matchup. I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to. You like Evan Ingram in this game, so
Yeah.
possibly that could be one of the main targets. But for all the money Jacksonville spent on wide receivers, not a lot of it's panned out for fantasy besides the first couple of weeks.
No, he's certainly been trending down in the wrong direction. Zay Jones, I threw into my DFS on the Lucky Bet Show with Ricky Larson, which you should check out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Cardinals Seahawks, Rondale Moore finally had a game, but it was in a losing effort for me fantasy-wise and for the Cardinals, right? Can you bank on him going forward here? The Seahawks have been strangely tough. Seahawks have been strangely a great team as they're in a class of the NFC West.
Yeah. Rondale Moore, he's a guy that I've not been sold on, and he hasn't given me a reason to be sold on him. He'll have a game here and there where it's a decent amount of points, and then he just doesn't stay even consistent. He stays consistently low, but that's not the kind of consistency you want. So until he puts together like maybe 3 games of just a solid, like maybe 10 to 15,
Yeah.
I'm not going to trust it. The only things I like out of this game are Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, maybe DK Metcalf, because if Geno's going to have a good game, he's going to have to throw to somebody. And on the other side, I'm not super sold on Kyler being all that great this week, but probably still a top 10 performance. But you got to start D-Hop, 22 catches in his first 2 weeks back.
MVP.
And then let's go with Zach Ertz as well, because if we look here, I actually really like Zach Ertz. Seattle, they give up 15 points a game to the tight end position, so why not Zach Ertz? He's been wildly consistent. He's a tight end 3 so far this year, and it's a favorable matchup against Seattle.
I like it. Rams, Bucks, the playoff hangovers in full effect for these guys. Should be 42.5 for the total. Maybe this is just going to be an awful game. Yeah. It's on CBS, so we'll get Tony Romo too.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, exactly. The scariest questionable in the game this week, Cooper Kupp. Sean McVay is kicking himself. That was the quote that he left him in. And that, scares the hell out of me. It's early in the week. We're not going to see anything more definitive towards the end. But you got to roll him out, right, if he's healthy.
As long as he's not out of the game, you got to roll him out. I haven't seen the injury report, but watching the game, it looked like it was an ankle, which is always scary.
Tissue swelling, I heard a little bit today. It's like, yikes.
Yeah, because even if it turns out to be a sprain, sprains have kept guys out for multiple weeks. Honestly, if they were smart, they would just sit them. What are you really playing for right now? And it's a game where it's still winnable because the Buccaneers haven't been all that great.
Yep.
And he's the best player on your team. You still got guys like Allen Robinson, Tyler Higbee that can go out there, give you something. Van Jefferson, if we go all the way back to the Super Bowl and the games before, he was decent enough.
Yeah.
Give Cooper Kupp that time to rest, because when that's literally the crown jewel of your franchise, you need to take care of it. And if you try to roll somebody out with an ankle injury that has to go out and make those kind of cuts, you're treading some scary waters.
Everyone's going to keep an eye on the injury reports throughout the week. Cade Otton. This guy, he should have had a touchdown last week. People are laughing at me he's getting 5 targets a game. I have a decision to make if I'm going Cade Otton or Taysom Hill. What are your thoughts on that particular matchup?
That's That's a tough question because we've talked about Taysom Hill a few times.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that in that tight end category, you kind of just got to roll him out because there's those chances for nothing. There's those chances for a lot.
Yep.
Um, it's tough to gauge. I mean, if you want to go for something that would be more reliable, then you'd go with Otten. But if you want to go for the higher potential, you go with Taysom Hill. And you can't ever project when he's going to have those kind of games
I
either.
know.
Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing that tells you, okay, this should be a good game for Taysom Hill. Okay,
So
this should not be a good game for Taysom Hill.
surprisingly, he's been right at 10 points, which is like, okay, I'll take him and I'll keep plugging him in. It's a double flex league for us, no kickers. I got to see if Brate's going to play again to kind of make that decision. I think officially right now I've got Hill in there, and I think I just picked up, I don't know, I picked up a tight end or something. Yeah, the last thing there was I late night. My friend must have been lost in the sauce, but he sends me a blind trade offer, and it's David Njoku who's sitting on my IR for Allen Robinson. And like my team's terrible. So I was like, okay, I need to take this right now. Was that the easiest
Right.
trade of my life?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, Allen Robinson, he's starting to come on. He had a
Targets are there.
very slow start. But he's a guy that we were dying to be fantasy relevant in Chicago. We saw he goes to the Rams, and we're like, okay, he can fill in that OBJ role. Starting to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we like David Njoku. We
Yes.
like him, but if he's sitting in your IR spot, then he's obviously not doing anything for you, and you need something. So
Exactly. And I'm starting
yeah,
A-Rod this week, and it's like Njoku has been a pleasant surprise this year, but that's, when is he going to come back? It's still kind of iffy on that injury. Yeah. So no brainer for me, but watch Njoku just absolutely pop off with my luck. All right, let's wrap up here with the two primetime games. Ricky Larson, you're great to get him back this week. Fiance Ricky Larson, congratulations in order as
yeah.
well to you, sir.
Thank
Um,
you.
Titans Chiefs, Kadarius Toney season. It certainly is Derrick Henry season. Any tough decisions here? Maybe Hardman might be a deep streaming option.
And the Chiefs are another team where there's gonna be points to be had. You just don't know where they're gonna be at. Uh,
What about Edwards-Helaire here? I'm a little worried about him.
I sold Edwards-Helaire a few weeks ago.
Good on you.
It was very, very happy surprise at the beginning of the season, very consistent, which allowed me to trade him high. He hasn't really done much though since then, and
The
it,
touches are scaring the hell out of me. I mean, he's been like, talk about touchdown dependent.
yeah,
Um,
I'm not sold on him, and if there is any other option, which it's the running back room, there's probably not many other options, but there's another option. I would definitely like to pivot, because it just hasn't been there, and it's been a very steady decline since the first couple weeks of the season.
Yep, definitely. Last game of the week here as we are into week 9. Ravens Saints. What do you do with Mark Andrews? He's been I think he's injured. And
Yeah.
that's going to be a scary injury report that you're going to have to wait till Monday. I don't even think you can mess around with starting him, but if you can maybe sneak in with a confident, like hold him off in a flex, I would. I mean, it's just like I did not start him last week. That paid off because he was clearly injured playing in that game. I did benched Devin Duvernay because I've been waiting for him to pop. It hasn't been there, but now Bateman's likely done for a while. What's your read here on our final primetime game?
I think you have to trust in Duvernay. Uh, I really am always hesitant on Baltimore receivers because it's big play dependency. And one thing I hate in fantasy is a player who's big play dependent. And that's what most of the receivers for Baltimore are. But with literally nothing else there, you've kind of got to go with it and hope that it sticks. Uh, Mark Andrews, 6.3 last week, like you said, playing through injury.
Yeah.
Guy that I kind of like, I believe is his backup, is Isaiah Likely.
Yep.
He popped himself up into the tight end 2 last week. I think it doesn't matter what tight end is there. Lamar is going to look for him. So if you do have Mark Andrews and you're like, do I play him? Do I not? Go get Isaiah Likely and possibly just plug him in because last week he did pretty all right.
Any worry? I think actually, for what it's worth, that Dalton's a decent streaming option. Any worry with Chris Olave? Got you a nice floor there of 10, but certainly a little bit of a down performance. I guess they didn't have to throw, right, for the way that
Right.
game was going.
Yeah, and it kind of irritated the hell out of me because there was no Jarvis Landry, there was
Hmm.
no Michael Thomas. I see that on my news feed, and I'm like, hell yeah, it's going to be a huge game for Chris Olave, and then it wasn't. So that irritated the hell out of me. But I think you can still count on Chris Olave uh, until he's consistently not doing anything like George Pickens did last week for me.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to stick on him, and he's an Ohio State guy. Let's
Yep.
go
Of course.
Bucks, okay? So I got to stick with them. Uh, Ohio State sitting at number 2 as well in
Oh my
all
God, they
rankings.
Penn State with the cover. That nearly was a heartbreaker for me
So.
when they took that pick six back. I was like, you got to be effing get, and then they marched it down the field, got it back.
The fun with
Oh
that was I went grocery shopping right before halftime. Get back, Ohio State's down by like 4.
yeah.
And I'm like, God, come on, you're pissing me off. And then 6 minutes worth of being
Oh
home,
my
and
God.
it's 44-24.
Crazy. I mean that yeah, they could do that to you in the blink of an eye. That defensive player who had a game for the history was crazy.
JT, JT, and some Hawaiian last name. I
Yep,
can't think of
yep.
how you would say his last name, but yeah, absolute stud.
Roll Buckeyes, all eyes on Michigan now, right? Ricky Larson, great to get you as always, and we'll talk to you next week. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you.